Have you ever wondered what if ancient alien astronaut theory is right? And then, what would you do if you actually lived there? Well, in Ankur, we're gonna find out.
Hello, welcome to SRD. Today we're back talking about the sci-fi fantasy RPG Ankur, Kingdom of the Gods, from Chris Miller Games. Very interesting RPG. I'm liking this one a lot, so we're gonna get right into how to play, how to run.
Before we start talk about character creation and stuff like that, tell us a little about the kind of the core mechanics of running the game. So, what are your not your attributes? They're called something else.
Aptitudes.
Your aptitudes. So, how does that work?
Aptitudes are your core stats. So they're physical and mental / spiritual in nature. You've got brawn, which is self-explanatory. It's your strength, your endurance kind of factor. Agility, which is literally dexterity, hand-eye coordination kind of deal. You have toughness, constitution in most games. Intellect, which is a big deal in this game, and we'll get to that. You have spirit, which is kind of like your willpower. Influence, which is charisma in most games, and they break down speed separate from agility.
Okay, and why is that?
So it goes into the action economy of the game.
Okay.
Every player gets a turn. With that turn, they can perform a single action.
Okay.
Based on the number of speed they have as an aptitude. Movement is an action. Attacking is an action. Any kind of skill use is an action, generally, unless it's a reactive kind of thing. So if you want to shoot, move, communicate, to borrow an old mill term, you need 3 speed to pull it off.
Okay, so for every point of speed, it's another action.
Is another action you can get in on your turn.
Very cool.
And once you get up to a certain number, you start taking a penalty on some actions.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it takes like 6.
Okay.
Which is a difficult number to get to in this game because of the way the numbers are capped.
Right. And the cap is actually 5, correct?
Yes.
With the attributes themselves, how are those attributes distributed at the beginning of the game?
So at character creation, you have whatever number the GM decides to tell you.
Okay.
Recommended is 20. But if they want to make it super difficult, they'll cut it down. If they want to make it kind of easy on your players, increase it over 20. And it's a 1-for-1 point buy. And that's it. And they can only be spent on those. You have to use them all. Any leftovers are lost.
And there's 8 stats.
There's 8 stats.
But only 5 is the max.
Right, 5 is the max.
But only 20 points.
But you get 20 points to start with.
Okay, 20 points to start with. Gotcha.
As you advance your character, you can spend your appropriate experience depending on which type of experience it is and which attribute your aptitude. So you're wanting to increase.
Okay.
So if you're using a lot of, you're constantly taking as many actions a turn as you can, and you're pumping that speed, the experience you gain, in theory, should go to your speed or could go to your speed.
Very cool.
If you're working, all heavy labor, all brawn, all toughness, and that's all you've done for this span of time or with these skills or whatever is going on in the game, then that's where we should put those.
And with that, there's certain races, right, that lend to that.
There are.
That have like minimums and caps and those kinds of things.
Correct. So this ties into the setting.
Sure.
So this is set in prehistory, 25,000 years ago, after the Great Flood, taking the chariots of the gods angle, set in ancient Sumeria.
Aliens.
It's aliens. But they call them gods because they're primitive people that were created by these things. The background story is aliens show up on Earth. They're there to mine gold because they need it to turn into mana that they can use to sustain themselves.
Sure.
And save their planet. And it's purely selfish reasons. They're here to strip mine Earth. They can't survive on Earth because their immortality doesn't last on Earth. Everything's different, so they start aging. And they can't maintain themselves on Earth. So they create the slave races, the Lukai. Is what they call the Earthmen. And in the Sumerian dialect that has been made up and researched for this game creates the names of all the castes, all the species. It's Chris Miller went in depth with the setting to include elements of a language that is dead.
Way dead.
Way dead.
Yeah.
And I'm not a linguist, but he probably got it right given how in depth he went with it.
I'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He did a bunch of research on it, and he gets a pass just for style points.
There you go.
So these alien overlords created these 5 subspecies out of the proto-humans that they found on Earth. And they are the Adamu, which are basically your modern humanoids.
They don't have a restriction on their stats, is that correct?
Correct. So each one of these races lends itself to certain styles of play and certain casts and certain things. And as we get into them, we'll explain a little more on them. Their minimums and maximums for your aptitudes based on what race you are.
Excellent.
So Adamu, they have no caps, they have no minimums either. So
very cool.
You can go middle of the road, or you can go whatever crazy balance you want to try to get. That's the way you want to go.
Sure.
The Enkaidu are strong, tough, gentle giant types. They were created to be manual slave labor and easy to deal with because they're even tempered. They're basically the draft horses of humanoids. They look kind of like Bigfoot.
Pick up rocks.
Not quite as hairy.
Over there.
Yes. Yep. You take this heavy thing and go over there, and I want you to go 10 miles with it, and they just do it. The way the artwork is in the book, it reminded me a lot of Wookiees out of Star Wars. Just not quite as hairy.
Okay. But the big long
but they're big, kind of gaunt, super strong, easy going. I imagine you get one of them riled up, they'll rip you apart. They're strong enough to do it. So you have the Balu, which are your halflings. They are created to be miners in small spaces.
Sure.
So there's your night vision. There's your tend to be a little jittery. They tend to be a little heightened on their senses. Kind of mean. The savage ones anyway are super mean. Right. Because they kind of got left by themselves and they went wild. So when I read through it, it reminded me a lot of the scene in the second Mummy movie where they're going through the jungle and the pygmies attack them.
Okay.
I envisioned that, only not undead. There's the Guma, which are aggressive, combative. They're made for war.
Okay.
They are knuckle dragon brutes that are totally happy with just breaking stuff. They're your Klingons out of Star Trek. They're your orcs out of fantasy. Your hobgoblins out of fantasy. Right. They're
just that aggressive.
That aggressive.
That's all they're there for.
All they're there for is to break necks and cash checks. And
there you go.
And they like it that way. And then there's the Mahadi. They are generally smarter. They're cone-headed. They look the most like their progenitor race. That's how all these species came about. These aliens took bits of their own DNA and mixed it with what they found on Earth already, and that's how you end up with these different delineations.
Very cool.
As a result, they look the most like their creators. They think they're the closest to their creators. They're generally smarter than everybody else, so they have a superiority complex.
Elves.
They
think they're smarter. They think they're better than everybody else. They look like they're gods.
That's it.
It's really good because there's just the races alone. There's a lot of play style there. There's a lot of role play just baked into the races that are there, which is awesome to have that much there just from that little bit.
And there's no restriction on what race can be what caste or which are classes in this, or what race can be a part of what guild, which is a function of the caste system.
You just might have an easier time.
You can have an easier time. Certain ones lend themselves better to other things because of how the min-max aptitude breakdown works. So your Enkaidu, for example, they can only be so smart. They have to be a minimum of so strong when you start the game. So that point buy has to be factored in with what species you're playing.
And then, so what about that caste that you were just talking about?
So the castes are effectively, they're your classes in other games, but there's no levels.
Right.
So where this matters is it really plays into the skills you get and how those skills cost at advancement. Anybody can do anything for the most part, but what ones are tied to your caste are way less expensive for you to get. And your guild membership matters in the way the setting plays against the society it's created.
Okay.
So you have the Lagaru, which are healers. Old school Dungeons and Dragons. Don't leave town without the cleric. This guy's your cleric. He's the only one that can actually heal anybody else. If you don't bring one, somebody's playing as a ghost, and yes, you can play as a ghost. We'll get to that. You can learn first aid. You can do basic stuff. Anybody can do that. But actual healing to the point of where it matters in game mechanics and saving your character from a bad deal, Lagaru is the only one that can do it. So you got your Naru, which is an entertainer. Mm-hmm. They're kind of like a bard.
Okay.
But they're also, the way the caste system breaks down in the guilds, they're on the low rung of society because they're also your dancers, they're your hookers, they're your any and every musician, entertainer type. I mean, whatever the flavor is.
Right.
To the point of even gladiators that don't technically fall in as a soldier.
Right.
If they're more martial in their aspect, they're there to put on a show. Your pro wrestlers would be not. Your Garridim, which are your soldiers, and they're everything from professional standing army to mercenary to paid security guard. They are professional fighters through and through. That's what they do. Your Handi, they're your psionics.
Yeah.
In effect, they're this world's wizards. There's no magic, there's psionics.
Right.
So it's trained. Some is aptitude based on your character's ability to even do it, right? But it's also taught, and that's an element within the game. So there's that cast. The Dubstar are the scribes, which is more like a chronicler and a storyteller and a recorder and a banker and a historian and one of the few that can read. Knowledge and information is super controlled by both the overlords and by the guilds themselves. Everybody's hoarding knowledge.
Sure.
So the psionists have their own language they work with. The Dubsar learn just about everything they can. The healers, the Lagaru, have their own medical speak. Now we're going to get into the Shirdim, the builders, the engineers, the smiths, the craftsmen. They have their own language, but it's based off of math because they didn't learn how to read or write. So they made their own complicated shorthand math.
Right.
That they all understand it and know.
Okay.
And in order to really grasp that one within the game, there's a prereq for having a baseline mathematics skill to even understand the language.
Nice.
And then you have your Barabu, which are your scouts. They're your rangers, they're your barbarians. They fit this simply because they are structured similarly to that. It's more like tribal outlanders than it is a true guild.
Gotcha.
So they're kind of outside society, but they come in and intermingle, and they're set up like a guild because they apply their trades in the city-states like everybody else does.
Okay.
As it's a dangerous place, and again, like old school RPGs, don't leave town without your healer. Don't leave town without a scout. You need these things.
You're a well-rounded party.
You have to have a well-rounded party.
So for your character, we've talked about the attributes, what they mean, and what they stand for. Our races and our casts. So that's pretty much. Then what? We just gotta pick our skills.
Yeah, you gotta pick your skills.
Okay.
So skills are literally everything else. They're your collected knowledge. They are your abilities. They're your special traits, your tricks, your whatever it is you learn to do. It's all skill.
Right.
And skills are done by circles, 1 through 9, to represent your level of mastery within the given task.
Right.
Yoga is actually one of the skills in here, and it provides quite a bit of benefit to agility.
Right.
And things play off of each other. They go back and forth with each other. You have some things that support other stuff.
Right.
All your balance skills tie in together.
And like we talked about in the last video, to level up in that particular skill, you just do it. You just do it in the game.
Or get trained, yes.
Or get trained.
And depending on how smart you are, and if it's a skill that's on your category list for your cast or not, it's expensive.
Okay.
So it doubles the cost if it's not, basically.
Gotcha.
If it's super complicated, it doubles it again.
Got it.
Meaning one that has to be taught. You can figure out how to weave a basket.
Yeah.
You can't necessarily figure out how to run a machine to build a gun. Difference between simple and complex skills.
Sure.
You can't necessarily, through trial and error, figure out how to fly a helicopter.
Now we've got our characters made. How do you play? I know it's a D12 system.
So
it's pretty simple, right? Like
it is. It's pretty straightforward.
Roll the die.
So once you get your skills figured out, you've got 100 points worth of experience that only go to your skills.
That you start with.
You start with. You start the game. So that's how you pick. You've got a couple other things that add into the flavor of that. You've got advantage, disadvantages. You have things like, as an advantage, you spend 10 experience out of this skill pool, okay? And you can get up something like ample dexterity.
Okay.
Minor fame and notoriety is an example. A skill specialization. Black market contact, luck, which plays into the karma point system in a minute. It gives you one more karma point that doesn't bite you back. So. Another one is alcohol resistance, rank within your guild.
Nice.
Already starting with some of these benefits.
Okay. So what does, because I know everything runs off of a single roll, right? There's only one die.
There's only one die.
And that's whether you're attacking or doing a skill. Right. So pretty much the how to play section is
explaining this core mechanic. So
which is roll a d12.
Yes. First, you need to figure out your action potential number for the task at hand, and that is derived from your aptitude score in the given stat. So, example would be if you're doing anything strength-based, it's going to be brawn. If you have a skill that applies to it, so I don't know, strong arm in something. If there's a skill for specifically arm wrestling, or there's a wrestling skill in here, we'll just use that. You're wrestling somebody. It's all brawn, right?
Right.
So your aptitude, let's say it's a 3, so you get 3, and then you're a 4th level, 4th circle in wrestling.
Okay, so 7.
So 7. That gives you an action potential number of 7. If there's no other factor involved from your GM, you're afraid of heights and you're trying to wrestle somebody on top of a building or a pyramid or something, or it's storming like crazy and you're getting attacked by whatever.
Okay.
That changes that a little bit, but for the most part, it's just you hitting a target number.
Right, and so in this case it'd be 7, you'd roll a d12.
7, you roll a d12.
And you want 7 or under.
You want 7 or under.
Okay.
1's an auto success, 12 is an auto crit fail.
Excellent.
Doesn't matter what the number is. If you hit that 7, it's a crit success. Let's say same example, let's say you're maxed out. You're 5 in brawn, and you're a master wrestler, you got 9. Add that up, it's 14, right?
Yeah.
That beats 12. So how that works is it's 2 over 12, back it down to 11, because 12 is off the table because it's an auto fail. It's a crit fail every time.
Okay.
So go to 11, subtract your overage from 11. That becomes your new crit success range.
Oh, so like everything.
So, yeah. So it open, but it still leaves 12 as your crit fail.
There's always a chance to fail.
There's always a chance to fail. Something bad will always happen.
Right.
You can manipulate some of this with morality and karma. Morality is literally the whole cosmic alignment concept, just distilled into a game mechanic. I really like the way this one approaches it.
Okay. So this is instead of alignment.
Instead of alignment, it has these broad stroke terms that actually provide a game core mechanic.
Okay.
So you have your morality in neutral, righteous, and wicked.
Okay.
Basically, neutral, you're sheep.
Okay.
You go along to get along. You're not out to make waves. In the event of you try to hide in a crowd, you have the advantage in that regard. They're gonna overlook you because you're a eyes down peasant.
Gotcha.
That's the whole neutral aspect. You don't really gain anything from it, other than it's really easy for you to get lost in the crowd.
Easy to blend in.
Easy to blend in.
Gotcha.
You don't stand out. Righteous, opposite end of that spectrum. You are old school paladin concept. It's a stereotypical lawful good to the nth degree.
Right.
It's the good for just cause, righteousness its own sake kind of deal. You are out to right wrongs. Not saying you're an idiot and you're not rushing into things foolhardily.
Not lawful stupid.
Right, not lawful stupid, but you are very much the, hey man, this isn't right, and I'm going to take a stand.
Sure.
That's the whole righteous idea behind it. They're convicted.
Okay.
Is probably the best way to describe it without just calling it righteous. And then you got wicked. Wicked is not necessarily evil. Wicked is selfish. Wicked is their alpha number 1.
Okay.
They're gonna rob their buddy.
Right.
Because they think they can get one over on him. Because life is hard and it's tough on the streets.
Okay.
And that's the mentality of those people.
So how does that play into the mechanic? Or does it just get those are the bonuses?
That's kind of how the bonus works out.
Okay.
So and you playing off of that with role play and how you manipulate things in the way you approach actions and the way you express things.
Okay.
Plays into the karma mechanic.
All right.
So every player gets 3 karma points. With these karma points, you can do things like gain a critical success on a roll, assuming it's mathematically possible.
Okay.
So you don't even have to roll. If it's mathematically possible, you burn a karma point and you crit success on whatever it is. It's a little buffer for that. You can save yourself on a failed roll. You say, no, I'm gonna pass that one. or you can do the option to ignore the failed roll.
Nice.
And just go on. Those are possible uses for it. The flip side, whenever you burn a karma point, you give the GM a karma point.
Excellent.
To then be the balance, the bad karma, that's going to come back and get you.
Okay.
And they can do pretty much the same thing with it, just against you.
Okay. So is that how they manipulate the core mechanic, is with that bad karma? Or can they always manipulate the core mechanic through story? So like you mentioned, they're on the pyramid, and so there's a thunderstorm, so
it's going to change. Yeah, it's going to throw in another. There's a third factor in there
Okay.
that adjusts that difficulty a little bit
Okay.
to change your APN. That's the gist of the core mechanic. That's the gist of karma. That's the gist of.
Well, it sounds like, you know, the game in itself is pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all you have to know is the skills, and then, you know, how to get in. The races and the classes themselves have kind of like that old second edition feel, to where there's a requirement in them. Like in the olden days, you rolled your dice in second edition Dungeons and Dragons, and then you had to meet a minimum requirement before you could be a paladin.
Yeah, which were ridiculous.
It was
right?
hard. It was really hard to do. So in this game, instead of rolling your dice to beat that minimum class that you want, you just point by your way into the minimum class you want.
It's achieved through the species
Right.
minimum max cap.
Yep. Very cool. So you talked about earlier something about playing about a ghost.
Yes, so the way this game works, it's all very, very much a spiritual concept in this game.
Sure.
Ghosts are an element. Ghosts are a thing within this game. Haunted areas. There's one of the guilds that they're grandmasters from across the way, all through their history, were committed ritual suicide and became ghosts so they could pass their knowledge on. Caveat to that is, you can bounce in and out of physical form, but it's very difficult. It takes a lot of effort. Your advancement changes a little bit. Most everything revolves around your spirit, and you have no physical stamina anymore, so that's all gone. Your things affect you differently, and you have to consume energy from the living to sustain your own existence.
Okay.
So there is all that negative context going on as well.
So is this a death mechanic, as in like you've died, now you become a ghost, or is this a thing that someone can do? Like I can just be a ghost if I want to.
You need to play through the game first. Have a character that's out in the world doing a thing, and then if the circumstances are right, then you may be able to pull it off.
Okay.
It's not a guarantee, and it's not an automatic.
Got you. Okay. There was probably one of my favorite books in third edition called Ghost Walk, where it was a whole book that was an option to where, you know, if your players die, here's another way of dealing with it other than, you know, ripping up your character sheet and getting rid of them.
Works in a very similar concept.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's really cool because, you know, players themselves, they tend to get attached to their characters. And so, you know, death can be, I don't want to say traumatic because that's over dramatic, but, you know, it can upset some people,
Right.
and sometimes some friendships. But sometimes for the GM, it can be difficult. Like, oh crap, you know, I didn't mean for them to die. Now what do I do? And so this gives you a nice way of
continuing the story.
Nice
And
mechanical
with
way.
some of these characters, like the ones that are heavily sonic based or the ones that are heavily spiritually based, maybe that is the end state for that character. Maybe they're wanting to be one of these grand masters that doesn't actually die all the way, and they become part of their guild's hierarchy of knowledge, and they just forever persist. And that's their end goal for the character, is to become something like that.
very cool.
It's a very much a doable thing, and it's already worked into the game.
So mechanically, we've talked about, you know, how to play it and how to run it, because it's the same. It's that mechanic. You know, you have
There's
the
no
D12,
variation.
and then they do their karma. You get some karma. You run a story. So, what kind of story tips do you have for running the game? I mean, how would you approach this game as a GM?
Get your players invested in the setting.
Okay.
Right? They've really got to grasp the concept that their character is a part of this guild. It's a part of this world, and put everybody on the same page. You're either all the same guild, which would be kind of boring, but all the same guild, or you're all working for the same city-state. You're all working for the same alien overlord who's sending you on all these missions, or you're underground human resistance trying to overthrow your alien oppressors.
Gotcha.
And you're working that angle, resistance style. As far as running it, just set your theme, set your tone. Once you get the maintenance work of setting characters up, it's a matter of doling out experience as they do. So And the characters are going to drive that. You don't really have to educate it very much. It's what are they doing generates this type of experience.
You talk about the guilds. Have you ever played Eberron?
Yes.
Dungeons & Dragons Eberron?
Yeah, big fan of Eberron.
So is it that important? Because I know like in Eberron, the families are very important to the role play.
You're talking about the Dragon Marked houses?
Yeah, the houses.
So
yeah.
Conceptually, yes, but to a higher degree because it's integrated into the society at more of a basal level.
Okay.
Everybody is a member of one of these guilds.
Right. Monster. Are there monsters?
There are monsters.
Okay.
And they are the gambit of whatever you want them to be.
Okay.
There's even dinosaurs in this book. Like, no kidding, dinosaurs.
So do their attacks just modify that number? Is that how that works?
Yeah, so everything's got a toughness. Toughness is derived mostly from your stat, right?
Sure.
And then the armor that something is wearing has a value based on how much of it is there.
Okay.
The numbers derive from the number of pieces of armor you're wearing and how covered you are.
Makes sense.
You roll against that number first off.
Okay.
With a perception roll, because that's your accuracy.
Okay.
If you beat that number, you skipped around their armor altogether, and you hit them where they were weak. You hit them where there's not any armor plating. So they're only wearing a helmet. You get them in the chest because they're a gladiator or whatever, and they decided not to wear a shirt that day.
And that'd be full damage.
That'd be full damage,
Okay.
and they take every bit of it. If you hit them in the armor, then the armor's resistance value works like damage reduction in other games.
Okay, that's what I was thinking as you're explaining it.
It just takes that damage off.
I like that a lot, actually, because it means that regardless of what you roll, unless it's a critical failure, it sounds like you're doing some damage, unless they got really beefy armor.
Yes, and there's rules for things like the rays and the
Sure.
the wands, the ray sticks, and
Gotcha.
some of the guns. The
So
way
I
they
can play
work,
Stargate.
there's
a wand.
There's a wand. There's
Big giant.
There's a staff that the
Stargate.
Yes, that does the same thing. Any magic item you can conceive, turn it sci-fi, and it exists here.
Very cool.
So yes, and those work the same way. Some of them even just completely sidestep that and just do minimum damage.
Very cool. So it sounds like
Every time you take this action, you're doing X damage.
very good. So you're always going to hit for the most part, other than the critical
There's
fail.
the potential to always hit.
Yes.
And then if you have someone who decides to try to build a juggernaut type character,
Right.
then okay, they might hit me, but the armor resistance is so high that it's going to soak up all that damage for me.
Right.
Or you're using an energy shield. And with that, that's the basics of how to play Ankur, Kingdom of the Gods. Remember to go check out Ankur, Kingdom of the Gods, Chris Miller Games.
Yeah. So Chris Miller sent this to us. He's actually out on the circuit right now, like we talked about in the last video. He's doing the convention scene. He's peddling his wares. Awesome guy. He did a lot of work on this book, and it definitely shows. The artwork is classic. The writing is great. He did all of his research. It's a fun game. It's a fun game, and if you like, sci-fi and you like a little bit of history in there.
I'm mad I didn't come up with this idea.
Yeah, I don't mean to say anything negative when I say Stargate, because I love Stargate. But to me, this is like the perfect game to play that.
Yeah.
And that I haven't seen a game that's really done that yet. So that's what I will be using it for personally. Is like this will be my Stargate game. With that being said, if you guys like this video, go ahead and hit that like button, share it with your friends, and as always, go ahead and subscribe. You guys have a good week. We'll talk to you later.